All right. Thank you guys all for being here today. So what I'm going to talk about is being a technical leader. So at work, we usually have two tracks that we're dealing with generally. We have individual contributors, our engineers, and we have people managers. And in a lot of places, it's been, especially in the past, it's been that the only way to get ahead, the only way to advance was to move into management. That was the only way to really have impact. That's the only way to make a change. This is no longer true in a lot of our companies, especially the larger organizations, but a lot of the smaller organizations now, and especially within SRE, where we're giving power to engineers more and more. We have strong technical leadership tracks, and this means that you can advance and you can have a very large impact on your company and on the industry without having to do people management. People management is not for everyone. So if we can, you want to find what's good for you. So the funny thing is that being a leader looks the same regardless of whether you're a technical leader or a people manager. You just have slightly different skills and tasks that you're working with. So I'm going to start with, something here. Give me just a sec to figure out why my clicker is not working and if it doesn't start working. All right. We're going to improvise. So I'm going to start with a little bit about who I am and how I got to where I am in my career. Hi, my name's Todd Polino. I'm with LinkedIn Site Reliability Engineering. We're about 400 plus people right now, so it's a fairly large SRE org. And within that org, I am a senior staff engineer. So I'm going to get into exactly what the titles mean in a little bit. But for comparison, within LinkedIn, we have 400 plus SREs. We have, I think right now, fewer than 10 engineers who are senior staff level or above. So it puts me in a place where a lot of the org looks to me for project leadership and what should come next, because I've been around for a little while and supposedly I know what I'm talking about. For the first 4.5 years I was at LinkedIn, I was working on Apache Kafka. I was fortunate to land in this position because I didn't really know what Kafka was when I started working there. And I ended up writing a book. I co-authored Kafka, the Definitive Guide for O'Reilly with one of my colleagues at Confluent. And I'm a registered locksmith. Find me later if you'd like to hear more of that story. So, how did I get to where I am right now? What did my career look like? So, like a lot of us, I have a bachelor's of science in computer science. I also know lots of people who have different degrees and no degrees, and it really has no impact on where they are as engineers and who they are as leaders. But around that time, I did a lot of different IT jobs. I worked for Washington Post. I ran IT for my entire school district when I was in high school. I worked for a nonprofit on the Hill running their sites. Eventually, I landed at AOL. And this was back when AOL was peaking. Like, cable modems weren't really a thing yet. They were hard to come by. AOL had, I think, 30 million members. Things were going great. I was on a team there called Internet Access. Internet Access's responsibility was for everything that helped AOL users get to the internet at large. So you're welcome for what that's worth. After AOL, I moved with a couple of my colleagues who were working on the same team as me up to a startup in Boston called Endeca. You've probably never heard of it. It eventually got gobbled up by Oracle. But I was a network administrator there. Ooh, title change. I was doing all the same work. I was developing tools and automation. I was also programming switch hardware and routers because there were only 3 of us and we all had to do all the different things. I liked being up in the Boston area. My girlfriend, now wife, did not like being up in the Boston area so much. She was from Texas. It didn't really agree with her. So I moved back down to Virginia, and after a month I don't like to talk about, where I took a stunningly boring job with Customs and Border Patrol, I moved over to VeriSign. So I started as a systems engineer at VeriSign. I was working on operating system and hardware standards. Eventually, I became a manager at VeriSign. I had a small team of people who were doing the same thing. They were responsible for operating system standards and hardware for Linux and Solaris and AIX. And after a little while, I realized that that didn't agree with me so much. I actually liked being a lot closer to the code and doing the work of an IC. Thankfully, this was not something that was a problem. It was not treated as a demotion. It wasn't treated as an issue. It was just, oh, well, you don't want to be a manager? That's fine. We can move you back into IC. We found a nice role. I don't know how nice it was. I was writing server-side JavaScript for a ServiceNow installation. It was a whole lot of fun. I learned a lot there. But I spent nearly 12 years at VeriSign, both as an engineer and as a manager. That almost caused me to not get the job as SRE at LinkedIn. There were questions raised in the interview process about, well, was I stagnating as an engineer? Did I not have the chops to make it? Why was I so long at VeriSign? 12 years is a lifetime in the internet. I mean, we're all used to bouncing from job to get the promotion and get a little more money, and that just seems like the thing to do. So when I landed at SRE in LinkedIn, I landed in a role where I had no idea what I was doing. Outside of my skills as an engineer, I was working on big data systems. I didn't even know what Hadoop was at the time, never mind Apache Kafka. I was pretty sure that the only thing Apache did was HTTPD. That's it. So within 6 months, I was giving talks on Kafka. I've done a lot of those. I've branched out now. I'm doing talks on SRE in general. So what was it that pushed me to this? How did I get to this place where I'm the one up here talking about being a technical leader, where 5.5 years ago, I'd never been an SRE before? It's all about finding out what makes you happy. Where's your happy place? For me, I like sharing my knowledge. I like to talk to other people. If you find me after the conference, please drag me out and do things because I'm also an introvert. So while I'm standing up here talking to you, I don't actually like doing it that much. And I need my downtime, but I also like to go do things. So, I knew that I was happy close to the code. I tried being a manager. I didn't like it. I went back to being an IC. Not everyone wants to be a people manager, as I said up front. Not everyone wants to be a technical leader either. Not every single person who's an engineer needs to be up on this stage. That may not be what they like doing. I know a lot of engineers at LinkedIn and other places who are really happy just banging out code. They're senior SREs, they're happy where they are, they don't want to move ahead, they don't want extra roles. We need to find ways to support those engineers just as much as those of us who want to be leaders and want to chase titles. Now, I don't necessarily want to chase the title, but I do want to chase the responsibility that comes with it. I don't have a lot of good answers about that, but I'm going to say it again. There's nothing wrong with being happy, banging out code, and doing the work that gets things done. If you have a room full of leaders, you're not going to get any actual work done. They're just going to sit there talking to each other about how awesome being a leader is and how it's great to do all these important things, but they're not actually going to do the work. Everyone has a role in this job. So I'm here, though, to talk about leadership. So we'll get into what the titles mean and then talk about what the leadership aspects of that are. So there's a story behind this. I don't know if you guys have this problem, but a discussion of what is a sandwich will derail LinkedIn SRE within about 5 seconds. And because she's still out there, and Carolyn's not going to give me any trouble with this, a tamale is a sandwich. So moving on. One of the things that we have at LinkedIn that not everyone does have is a clear way that we measure engineers. This has been developed through our hiring process. It has been developed through our promotions process. It makes it a little less arbitrary. So in some places, titles and promotions are very much at the whim of managers. You might get a promotion because you've been with the company a really long time, and that makes you a senior employee instead of just an engineer. You might get a promotion on the back of 1 or 2 projects. It all changes in a lot of places. Within our org, we have pretty clear definitions of how we measure our engineers, and what the titles along the way mean so that you know that the title does have some meaning. This is why I say I do chase titles to some extent, because where I am right now, they have a clear meaning. So you don't need a title to be a leader. You can do the work without the title. It's not a problem. It just may be that you have to work a little extra hard to get people to listen to you because you don't have, if you're a manager, great. If you're a director, hey, you've got a lot of managers underneath you, you've got a lot of responsibility, I'm going to listen to you a little more. If you're an SRE, you're senior SRE or senior staff SRE, you move along. People tend to look to you for different things because of that title, but the title does not make the role. So I'm going to talk about what the titles mean at LinkedIn. One of the problems in our industry is there is no formalization of this at all. I'm going to say I'm a senior staff engineer. That's going to mean something different if you're at Google. It's going to mean something different if you're at Facebook, Netflix, anywhere else. We all have different definitions of how we work through this. So I'm going to use LinkedIn's titles because I'm familiar with LinkedIn's titles, and you can kind of translate that to what it means at your own company. Perfectly happy as well to talk about what happens if you don't have a good title progression, how you work with that. We can talk about that later. So I'm going to start with junior SRE. And for all that we actually have a title junior, we rarely use it. This is usually an intern. And before I go any further, pay your damn interns. People die from exposure. So junior SREs, interns, they are task-driven. You give them some work to do, they do the work, they come back and ask, what's the next thing? They're probably still learning to code, or at least learning to code well, and they're definitely being mentored by someone. Especially when you're an intern, you usually have a project that you're working on that someone else is leading for you. So once you get a little experience under your belt, you've been an intern, maybe you got hired into the role, that happens a lot. Now you're an SRE, kind of our standard mid-level position. You're going to be more project-driven at this point. You're going to be tasked with doing some small amount of work that usually involves multiple tasks, and then showing your results afterwards. You've got a little bit more autonomy to do the work that you need to do at this point. You're going to be developing tools and automation. Oh, also, I will post these slides right afterwards, so don't worry too much about taking pictures or notes. They'll all be available with all the notes. So you're developing tools and automation, you're making life better for people, you're sharing your knowledge with your teammates, you're learning from them, they're learning from you. Things are getting better. You've got more responsibility at this point. Now we move up to senior SRE. So at senior SRE, you're kind of generally considered to be a stack expert. So if you're in the Apache Kafka space, then you kind of know all there is to know about how Apache Kafka runs at LinkedIn. People look to you for answers on those projects. You're doing design, you're doing collaboration work, sometimes within your team, sometimes with your developers, but you're involved more intimately with the stack that you're an expert on. Tests and documentation are standard for you. You write good code, you do it all the time. People look to you for an example of how this stuff should be done. And you're probably mentoring other people, especially interns. This is a good place for people to be mentoring the intern projects as they come in, helping out new hires. You're probably receiving some mentorship yourself at this point. It's always a good idea. So from here, we move up to staff SRE. That's our next title at LinkedIn. Staff SRE, you're definitely moving into leadership at this point. You are considered a domain expert. So whereas before you knew all there was to know about how to run Kafka at LinkedIn, now you know all there is to know about how streaming works at LinkedIn. So it encompasses more than just a single stack. You are working constantly to up-level your team's craftsmanship and execution. In fact, in a lot of cases, a staff SRE also carries the informal title of team lead. You're the person who's helping out with figuring out what work has to come next for your team. So you're defining the work that has to happen. You're helping to task other people. You're kind of the right-hand man or woman to the manager that you're working with, so that they can focus on the people management and the HR aspects, and you can help drive the projects forward. Sorry about that. So next up, senior staff SRE. This is where I am right now. So you are solidly a technical leader at this point. You're a technical leader within your organization as well. So this is a technical leader within SRE. You're working on efforts that cross all of SRE, and I'll get into some of what those projects are in just a little bit and what that looks like. You're driving a lot of work that has company-wide impact. So the projects that you're working on tend to change the way your entire company does work, or a large portion of your company does work. We do have titles above senior staff. The next step up from that is principal staff. LinkedIn has one principal staff SRE right now. And then you have distinguished engineer past that. I don't know a lot of those guys, but we do have some distinguished engineers on the development side of things. So there's still steps to go past this. There's always a new thing you can be doing. There's always a new title. Really, what happens is you're doing the same kind of work. You're just scaling up the impact of that work as you move along. So we measure all of these people in the same way. We use the same yardstick to measure all of them. And this makes it very easy. We have clear CPP documents, career progression path documents, that describe what these yardsticks look like at each of those levels. So at the very bottom, you have execution. Execution is simply getting things done. Not GTD, I'll talk about that in a bit, but just getting stuff done in general. You've got work, it gets completed on time, it gets handed off. This is the base for everything. You have to have execution before you can move on. Above this, you now have craftsmanship. This is doing things well. So not only are you getting the work done, but you're doing it nicely. You write tests for your code. You write documentation for your code. You help other people with these things as well, but you make reusable modules so other people can benefit from the craftsmanship that you've generated. And at the top, you have leadership. Leadership is simply enabling other people to get things done well. So you take the execution and the craftsmanship, and now you apply that to the task of helping other people to come along and do those things. And the top of the pyramid is cut off clearly not because I couldn't make the font fit otherwise, but because there's always a little bit more to evaluating people. You can't simply use 3 measures and describe everyone. We have infinite combinations of engineers. There's always a little bit else. Sometimes we describe that in terms of citizenship. So what are the other things that you're doing around your job that help your fellow engineers out? What are the nice things you do? Do you run meetups? Do you do social events? What are the other things that make you who you are? So this all comes into play when we're doing evaluations. But I'm going to talk about leadership today. I'm going to talk primarily about leadership because the other 2 things are pretty easy to measure. Execution and craftsmanship are not difficult for us to measure. Are you getting work done? Are you getting work done on time? What's your test coverage look like? Are you making insightful comments on review boards? These are all things that are pretty easy. Leadership is a lot harder to determine what's good and what's not, and whether people are doing a good enough job. A large part of this is because the roles aren't well defined when you start moving into technical leadership. We had a meeting on this recently within LinkedIn with senior staff engineers and above, and we were talking with our head of engineering about how we're not really sure, how do we define our roles, how do we measure what we're doing? And his answer was pretty simple. It's like, you define your role. I don't define your role for you. You tell the company what it is that you should be working on because you're the leader. You're the one who's supposed to be identifying good work to do. So this also makes it really hard for me to stand up here and tell you what technical leadership looks like because it is different for every person. It's going to be different for each of you. I can look at someone like Kurt Anderson, who I work with, and see that we're doing some similar things. We're both doing a lot of external engagement, but even at that, our roles are very different. He's doing different types of things than I am. So if this is so difficult, why should you even bother doing it? I mean, you could just continue to collect your paycheck and do some really cool work. There's good benefits. So first off, we like a challenge. I mean, it's hard, so let me master it. Let me figure out how to do it. But it doesn't just happen because of that. The first thing is that people don't scale, maybe horizontally. I've done a little bit of that in the past couple of years. But you can't clone engineers. You can have the best craftsmanship, you can have impeccable execution, but you only have so many hours in a day. You can't do all the work yourself. The only way that you can expand the amount of work you're doing is by bringing other engineers up to your level, by helping them identify the work that they should be doing and enabling them to do it well. That's one way to increase your impact. The other way is to identify the right work, as I was saying. So you can increase engineers' skills. You can also identify the work that they should be working on. As a leader, you're expected to know what's the next thing that we should do? What's the next problem that we should solve? Just like a CEO sets the vision for their company, but they don't do the actual work on the ground, technical leaders identify the vision for their organization and help to enable that to happen. There's also a lot of self-interest involved here. So if you're up-leveling the engineers around you, if you're enabling them to do better work and get the right things done, then you can all move on to the cool projects. You can all move on to the really neat stuff that you can get into. You can also expand your own brand. You extend how much people know you and the opportunities that become available to you. You also make more money generally, and money's a good thing. We all like money. So there's a lot of things involved here why you want to become a leader. If you want to become a leader. I'm gonna go back to that thing I said at the beginning is find what makes you happy. If you like taking on additional responsibility, do it. If you don't want to spend a lot of time in meetings with management, probably leadership's not where you want to be because you're going to end up doing a lot of that. So what kind of projects do leaders work on? What are the kind of things that you should identify as impactful work for you? You want to focus on projects that require leadership skills. What does that mean? So we start with engagement. This is coordinating multiple teams. So projects that require a lot of engagement, projects that require a lot of teams to come together and do the work require leadership. And they require increasing levels of leadership depending on the number of teams that you're involving. So this is one way to identify the things that you want to work on. The other is the impact of the project. So you're looking for projects and work that will significantly change the way your organization does its job. You have to put the two of these together, though. You can have a huge project that involves every single team in your company, but if it makes things worse, it really was a failure of leadership to do that project in the first place. That should have been identified, that should have been up-leveled to start with. On the other side of things, you can have a project with amazing impact. You can make a change to the code that drops latency by 50% by removing a potential deadlock. But there's no leadership there. You went in and you made the code change. You didn't really have to engage a lot of people to do that. You fixed a great problem, and I mean, you should be rewarded for that, but it's not technical leadership. So you need both things together. Another thing that I look for, particularly when I'm working on evaluating candidates for promotion, is the inception of the project. Who came up with the idea? Now, as a lead, you don't need to always be identifying every single piece of work that has to happen. You're not going to know every single piece of work that has to happen. And that may not even be what you're working on most of the time. But you should be able to identify these things from time to time and either drive them yourself or hand them off to someone who can. And keep in mind that not all the projects that we work on are technical. One of the most valuable things that we can do as leaders is change the process within our company for the better. Now, this involves a lot of different areas. You might attack the incident management process at your company. Use some of the information that we gained in the opening sessions this morning about doing interviews better or having a blameless culture, and apply that to the problems that you have within your organization. You're going to have a huge impact by doing that. You're also going to require a lot of engagement because you're going to need to get everyone to agree to the new process. But process changes are some of the most powerful ones that we can do. So let's talk about some examples of projects based on what I and other people are doing at LinkedIn right now, the kind of things that staff, senior staff, and above engineers are working on. First one is called SREcon19. This is our own internal version of SREcon. Now, I did say we were about 400 plus people in our organization. For the past 3 years now, we're coming up on the 4th year, we've had this internal conference. It is multiple days off-site We have 4 talk tracks, I think, over multiple days. We have talks that are proposed and reviewed. We have a program committee. It's exactly like any external conference. It's just that it's only for LinkedIn with some invitations to Microsoft and GitHub colleagues as well who are involved. This is great. Kurt's been running it for the last 3 years. Myself and another engineer have taken over as co-chairs this year because it's just growing in scope so far that it requires multiple people to run it at this point. So everyone involved is in a leadership role. We're identifying good content. We're helping to teach other people. Big one. Site Reliability Technology Leadership Group, or SRTLG as we call it. This is another big project that a lot of people are working on internally. This is a group that gets together now 2 times a week to review projects, figure out what work has to happen, give feedback to new projects about site reliability concerns that they may have. We have not only a core team, but also a bunch of staff plus engineers generally who are on the SRTLG group and doing the reviews. So a lot of opportunities for leadership here. We have promotion committees. Like many companies, a lot of our promotions at the upper levels are actually driven by individual contributor panels, not by managers. So staff and above, we have a committee that evaluates candidates, decides who should get promoted, and we give that as a recommendation to management. It's phrased as a recommendation, but it's the IC decision. That's rarely overridden at this point. So we have, again, a core team, and we have lots of people who are leaders who are identifying these people internally to be promoted. And then we have what we call horizontal initiatives. These are large technical projects that require a large amount of engagement. They cross multiple engineering organizations. So we have a horizontal committee that identifies which projects are the most impactful. And we have then engineers who run those projects. So there's always a technical lead on them who is going to drive that and make sure it gets completed. I'm in the middle of one of these this quarter where we're onboarding everyone to a performance tool internally. So it requires me going out to all the teams and making sure, okay, are you ready to onboard to the performance tool? Okay, great. I'm going to go ahead and take care of that for you now. Oh, you have a problem. Let me fix that. Let me engage another engineer to help out. These are just a few of the projects that we work on internally at leadership levels. Again, these are more, the leads involved are not working on the ground. We're engaging other engineers to get the work done. So project's done. Okay, let's move on to mentoring, because mentoring is another large part of being a leader. So this is not only, this is a lot about teaching other people. So you're trying to get other people to have good engineering skills, good craftsmanship, good execution. That's at the more junior levels. As you start to move up, engineers are more interested in, okay, how do I get promoted? What are the projects that I should be working on? How do I become a leader? How do I raise myself up a level? But it's not only that, it's also about learning from other people. So you want to be a mentor, you also want to be a mentee. You're never going to know everything there is to know. You should always be learning. Anyone who tells you that they know everything is a fool, or they're trying to sell you something, like maybe an electric car. So you should be mentored as a leader as well. You want to find someone above you. It gives you multiple benefits. Not only do you get to make use of their skills and insights and learn things for yourself, it also gives you a safe place to vent. Because especially when you're in a leadership role, you're going to run into situations that you don't like, and sometimes they will make you mad. And you need a good place to be able to talk about that. Your mentoring relationship in some cases is as much a counselor as anything else, and just a place for you to talk and get things off. You don't want to take that home with you. You don't want to take it back into the office. So you need to have someone you can talk to about these things. Another great place to show leadership is with external engagement. This is actually required within LinkedIn as part of being a lead. As you start to move up to the staff and above level, it clearly states in the documentation, in our CPP documents, that my role is to be recognized as an expert on my stack or my domain inside LinkedIn and outside LinkedIn. So not only am I here in self-interest and because I like to share. I'm also here because it's part of my job. It's part of my job to share what we know with everyone else, to not only learn from everyone else around me and find out better ways to do things, but just to try to raise the state of the industry that I'm in, whether that's Kafka, SRE. At the staff level, it tends to be the technology stack. As you move above that, it tends to be the organizational domain you're in. There are a lot of ways to do this. I'm going to run down the list, and I'm probably going to take more time than I need to on this. But my first one, every time I talk about external engagement, is always Toastmasters. So if you're not familiar with what Toastmasters is, it is a worldwide organization that's dedicated to helping people build communication and leadership skills. I can virtually guarantee that every single person in this room has a Toastmasters chapter that is close to them at home. This is a great place to go and learn public speaking and communication. It is a safe place where you can stand up and talk in front of a smaller group of people on lots of different topics, different formats. You'll get good constructive criticism, and you'll get comfortable with the process of communicating publicly. So once you do that, you can then move on to more of the fun things. So we start with meetups. Meetups are great. They're local. They're usually single technical topic, sometimes multiple technical topic. They're meeting frequently. Most meetups always have a need for new speakers to come in. The bar to entry is fairly low. You don't have to go through a proposal process that you do for a conference generally. You can just talk to the meetup organizer and get your talk put together for the next one. We also have Ignite and Lightning talks. I bundle these together, but they're a little bit different. And if you're new to this, start with Lightning and worry about Ignite later. So Lightning talks are generally 5-10 minutes long. You're going to talk about a single topic very briefly. Especially at conferences, they'll pick up Lightning talks afterwards. There's a lot more opportunity to do that. Ignite talks are a little bit different. If you're not familiar with the format, it's a 5-minute talk as well, but you have 20 slides that advance automatically every 15 seconds. So there's a little bit of pacing and practice that goes along with that. There are Ignite talks held, I know, all over the US. I'm pretty sure all over the world as well. You can find people who are doing these either at conferences or separate from conferences in plenty of places. It's a great place to get a little bit of talk practice going without having to put together a 20-minute or 40-minute or 1-hour talk to get up on stage and talk about something. Once you've got that comfort, you can move on to conference talks. So here you're going to do proposals. You're going to be accepted. You're going to be rejected a lot. Don't worry about the rejections. The worst thing anyone can do to you is say no. And honestly, the word no isn't that bad. Keep trying. There's lots of different conferences out there, and once you get your foot in the door with one conference and get one conference talk done, it's a lot easier to do the next one. You get to know what people are expecting in terms of proposals. You get more comfortable with the process. There's also industry steering groups that you can be involved in. So USENIX is one. ACM, IEEE are others. There are also more domain-specific groups, for example, NANOG, the North American Network Operators Group. You can be involved with these organizations and help drive conferences like this. You can help learn from other people in places like NANOG and meet with other people and talk about what's going on. There are tons and tons of different ways to be involved at this level. I can't possibly go over all of them, so I'm just going to move on. I'm going to move on to writing. Writing is another good way to get yourself involved with communicating externally. And you can start small. Every single person in this room has the capability to set up their own blog and start writing right now. You can probably have it done before I finish talking today if you wanted to. You can pick any topic you want. You can write lots and lots of different things. You can write personally, you can write professionally, you can mix the two. You can also write articles for other sites or other magazines. This requires a little more effort. Usually you have to go through a little bit of proposal here. You might write your article on spec and then send it around to a couple different people to get it published. Gets you a little bit more exposure because you don't have to do all of the search optimization yourself. You move up to short form publishing. These are shorter books. You can work with a publisher. You can self-publish these. It's nice because there's less work involved in writing a large book. But if you want to write a large book, you can. This is generally 200 plus pages when you're talking about technical books. You're going to go through a proposal process with the publisher. You can also self-publish here. Plenty of people do that. Budget a lot of time to do this. It's going to take way more effort than you think it is to write a technical book. I speak from experience here. I think it took us 1.5 years to write the Kafka book and get it out there just because of other commitments going on. And another great way to get involved with leadership is in diversity, inclusion, and ethics issues. And we have so many of these going on. A lot of people may categorize these in with soft skills, but there's nothing trivial about this space at all. We are reminded on a daily basis that there is a constant need to talk about these issues and to just get people involved. I've known a lot of people who are leaders in this space. I am definitely not. I am not the best person to talk to about this, and that's okay. We don't all have to be leaders everywhere. But I do want to highlight a couple, some talks this week that you can go to if you want to learn or be inspired. The first is Courtney's talk, Retrospectives for Humans. I have seen this talk. It is excellent, excellent introduction to inclusive language and inclusive processes in postmortems and retrospectives. There is also Ethics and SRE, which is in our closing session. Oh, by the way, Courtney's talk is 2 o'clock in this very room. So I highly encourage you all to be there. It's going to be great. Ethics and SRE from Laura and Theo is one of our closing sessions. I have not seen this talk, but I have seen other talks that Laura has done, and I've talked with Theo, and I'm sure this is going to be quite engaging knowing the both of them. And that's it. So we have 3 days of conference, 3 tracks per day, and we have 2 talks that I could identify that are strongly identified with diversity, inclusion, and ethics. There's a huge opportunity in this space. I said I'm not the person to talk to. There are plenty of other people who are. Ask them. Find out how you can get involved. In many cases, they will be more than happy to engage with you and talk about this. For many of the rest of us, those of us who are in privileged positions, whether it's by nature of who we are, how we grew up, the fact that we already have the stage, it's an opportunity for us to listen to everyone else. If you're a leader, it's critical that you know when it's time for you to shut up and let someone else lead. So I talked about a lot of work here, a lot of things that go into what leadership looks like. But honestly, how do you identify meaningful work? There's one very simple way to do this. Every time you hear someone say the phrase, somebody should do something about that, somebody should fix that problem, be someone. Be the somebody that answers that. That's how you identify things that are meaningful. This is meaningful to at least one person. And it's probably meaningful to more people than that. So that person has just done you a favor and identified meaningful work that you could take on. Now, either you can take it on yourself, or you can raise it as an issue and get other people engaged in working on it. But either way, you should step up and be a champion at that point as soon as you hear that phrase. So let's move on to some more concrete things that you can work on to make things better in your life. These are going to apply regardless of whether or not you're in leadership, you're an IC, you are a people manager. They work great at home, most of them. Probably not all of them. You might get some argument in a few places, but that's okay. The first thing is the idea of keeping a paper trail. The human brain is great at reasoning. The human brain is not very good at remembering things. So this is why we write things down. So we start with documenting our projects. And we all know this. Some of us do this. Not all of us do this. Not all of us do it all the time. Documenting your projects, that can be writing manuals. That can be commenting your code, writing tests, doing design work. There's all kinds of things that you can do. What it does is it gets it out of your head and puts it down where other people can access it. It turns tribal knowledge into artifacts that people can use. Because if the documentation only lives in your head, you have a bus factor problem. You're going to walk out the door, get hit by a city bus, and everyone's going to be the worse off for it. If you've written it down, then you can worry about your recovery and not have to worry about the site that's crashing because you're not there running it. Track your work in tickets. We all hate our ticketing systems. I don't care which ticketing system you have. It's always the worst piece of crap that you have to work with in your organization. It's slow, it's horrible, you never want to use it. This goes along with keeping a paper trail because now you're keeping the status of your projects and what has to happen next. It also helps you with engaging other people to get the work done, which, as we said with leadership, that's a large part of what the role is, engaging other people to get the work done. I no longer do craftsmanship and execution. I do craftsmanship and execution through getting other people to do craftsmanship and execution. That's the way it works as you start to move up. And keep a list of what you've done. This isn't about bragging. Every single one of us has to go through at least an annual review, maybe a quarterly review. You're going to have to talk about what are the things you did justify your existence. When you go up for promotion, you're going to have to come up with all the things that you did that justify what that promotion should be. If you've been writing this down from the start, if you keep a running log of the key projects, key pieces of evidence for like the work you've done and how your craftsmanship has grown and what your execution is, it's going to be a lot easier to write all of that at the end of the year or when the promotion process comes along. How many of you are cringing right now? How many of you are nervously checking your phone to see if you have any red dots? How many of you are saying, well, at least my number's not that high? I hate this. I can't stand this. Being organized is critical to getting your work done. It's not about having every single minute of every single day planned out in advance. The best metaphor that I've heard for this is a kitchen. You want to cook dinner. Cooking dinner is a lot easier when the counters are clear, when your ingredients are put away where they belong, when your sink is clean and the dishes are put away. You can get started at that point. It's not about having every single meal planned out for a month. It's being able to sit down and cook. It's about being able to improvise in the moment because you know where everything is and what you have. How many commitments are in that email box? How many emails are in that box? All we know is it's at least 14,359. Those are just the unread ones. How many bills are there that need to be paid? How many messages from long-lost friends that you haven't seen in years are in there? How many requests for help? We don't know. The person who has that inbox doesn't know. They have no idea what their commitments are. When you clear this out, you know what your commitments are. Being organized is about understanding where all your resources are and what your commitments are. So inbox zero sounds kind of hokey sometimes, but it is a practice that is valuable for all of us, going through and clearing this all out on a daily, weekly, whatever basis. Now there's lots of different organizational schemes you can use. Personally, I'm a fan of getting things done. I've been on and off with that for years. It works really well for me. Right now I'm getting back into it. But find the thing that works for you. Because I know that when I don't have any red dots on my phone, when I know that all my inboxes are empty, I'm far more productive and I'm getting more work done because it's organized better for me. And this is really all about being able to get to the place where you can step outside your comfort zone. When you have everything down, you can now start to take risks. You can start to do new things. You can learn new things. I know it's called a comfort zone for the reason. I like sitting on the couch and playing video games as much as the next guy. I actually bought a new Switch to take along on this trip with me so I didn't have to steal my kid's Switch. But I've also enjoyed becoming a sub-4-hour marathon runner when I never thought I could run that distance, much less run it fast. I've enjoyed becoming a father, despite how much I always said I never wanted kids. It's maybe one of the best things that's happened in my life. I benefited greatly from stepping into the unknown and doing something that was not comfortable. I took a job across the country with LinkedIn when I could have just stayed at VeriSign and continued to pull in a pretty nice paycheck and work with people I enjoyed. My wife may disagree with this. We moved back to Virginia a couple of years ago, and we originally made the decision to move to LinkedIn while she was high on painkillers in the hospital, but that's okay. It worked out. You never know what's out there for you unless you risk. And that leads into just doing more. So one of the best pieces of advice I've heard is to always say yes. Say yes when you're asked if you can help. Say yes when you're faced with a new opportunity. The only thing I ever regret about work was not following up on an interview with Citibank when they asked me to come in and talk about a vice president position when I was an engineer. Like, no, you've got the wrong person. But who knows where that would have led for me. So say yes as much as you can. You also have to learn how to say no. Engineers were faced with far too much work going on all the time. So you need to know when to turn down projects, when you've got too much on your plate. For some of us, we also need to identify when it's not safe for us to say yes. We go back to diversity, inclusion, and ethics. Sometimes we're going to put ourselves in a dangerous situation when we say yes. Sometimes the ethics are wrong. We know that the project is wrong and it should not go forwards. And as leaders, we need to stand up and say no at that point and use our power to do that. So that's a nice contradiction. Leadership is full of contradictions. You have to listen, you have to make decisions. You need to be approachable, but you also need to guard your time. And going back to the beginning, all of us have different jobs to do. You need to define what the roles are for yourself. And since I only have about a minute left and I do want to leave a little bit of time for questions, I'm going to go through the next few slides relatively quickly. And as I said, I will post them immediately afterwards so they're available for you. So what can you do to get started? If you're an engineer, start with developing a 10-year plan. This is sitting down and figuring out where you want to be personally and professionally in 10 years. If you don't do this, if you don't know where you want to be, any path will take you there. You need to know where you want to end up to make the right decisions along the way. Then talk to your manager, find a mentor, and get started on those tips and traps in the previous session, because that's all going to get you on the right path. Now, if you're a manager, you need to find out what your engineers want. If you do not have one-on-one set up with them already, I want you to commit to doing that before the end of this week. Get them all scheduled for as soon as you get back. You need to be talking to them on a regular basis. And if you're a manager of managers, make space in your schedule for skip levels. And then champion the things that they want to do. Help them take responsibility for projects. Help them move forwards and grow. And if you're already in the technical leader space, take on a mentee, or maybe two. Make some time for that in your schedule. Help up-level other people around you. And share the spotlight. You cannot be leader on all the projects. You need to find engineers who are looking for more responsibility and give it to them. They're going to take more time to do the work than you would. They're going to fail. You need to let them fail. You need to let people around you fail because the only way we learn is through failure. So you have to let other people learn this way. And with that, I want to thank you for spending some time listening to me talk. When one of us gets better, we all get better, the industry gets better. So I'm happy to answer any questions you have now for probably about 5 minutes, I think. 4 minutes, I went a little over. If not, I will be around for the next few days, and you can always find me to discuss something in a less public setting, or you can drop me an email on LinkedIn. Yes, we eat our own dog food. So thank you very much.
Please use the microphone.
Yep. There's a mic there, there's a mic there. So just step up to the mic and go ahead.
I want to challenge your statement that you're not the person who talked about inclusivity. On the previous slide to that one, you talked about the things looking outside the organization. And it actually struck me that most of those things are actually not particularly inclusive to people who live in a remote area or a remote community, or people who are a single parent and they don't have the huge time availability to sink into those things. So what's the advice that you could give for achieving that same goal, but to the people who are in situations where they don't have that kind of time or availability?
So it's a very good question. As someone who wants to share, as somebody who wants to speak and get involved, you can do so online. A couple weeks ago, I did an online panel with a bunch of engineers, and I did it from the flat I was staying in London. There are opportunities for that. There are virtual DevOps days. where you can do meetings from wherever you are. As someone who wants to listen, who wants to learn, you can do the same thing. There are plenty of online opportunities for these things. So you're right, sometimes you have to travel to get where you're going. It's also why I like meetups, because they're local and you can generally get involved with those a little better. You don't have to do travel planning to get there.
I have a related question. So that answers the locality part of that, but is there an understanding, at least in larger organizations, that doing that kind of work can happen to some extent within work hours, or does it have to be online or in meetups in the evenings?
So it definitely can happen within work hours. The time that I spent writing was actually largely within work hours because external engagement is important to us. We recognize that building my brand and building LinkedIn's brand is important to everyone moving forwards. When we talk about it, we get more engagement. Some of the DevOps days meetings are during the day. I know a lot of the virtual, like there was one 24-hour DevOps day. There's a lot of during the daytime. We're going to spend time away at conferences like this as well. Our company should support us in those efforts. And part of finding where you need to be, finding where you want to be in 10 years, is finding the right company as well that will support where you want to be.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Hi, my name is Song. I work for ServiceNow. I'm the tech lead in SRE Sydney, Australia. This is a great talk, by the way. I can really relate to some of the things you just talked about. So I find that even as a tech lead, there's a human component to it. So for example, when you are working with a team of people, inevitably, I think you'll run into some people issues sooner or later. Can you please share some of the challenges you faced when you try to bring different teams together to work on a project, or when you try to enable or motivate people in your team to work on a project?
Absolutely. The biggest piece of advice I can give to you is to listen. One of the things that I have benefited from greatly is that I can understand that everyone within my company is working towards the same goal the best way they know how. One of our speakers this morning talked about, I can't remember what the phrase was, but assuming that the decision that was made at any point in time was the best decision that could be made at that point in time. So if I listen to the other engineers who are involved, the other managers, about what their concerns are and allow them to voice them, I can then look at that with a critical eye and say, okay, they're trying to do the best thing they know how. How can I meet them in the middle? How can we make sure that they meet their goals and I meet my goals? Now, I've dealt with my share of difficult people, and it's not fun. It's part of why I got out of being a manager, is because I was having a problem dealing with that on an actual HR basis. Doesn't mean I still don't have to deal with difficult people, but I spend time listening to them, and I know that they're not working against me. I know that they're just trying to do the right thing. So if we're both trying to do the right thing, you can always find common ground.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.